Do not treat this like a normal video. Do not skip ahead. Stay with this until the end, because the truth here doesn't explode. It seeps. What you're about to hear is not a list. It's not a conspiracy. It's a record of how power behaves when it thinks no one is watching. Subscribe now, because stories like this don't trend by accident, and they don't stay visible without support. For years, the Jeffrey Epstein story has been told as a horror with a beginning and an end. A predator discovered. A trial, a conviction, a death clean. Contained, finished. That version is comfortable. It's also false. The newly released Epstein files don't change the story because of what they reveal. They change it because of what they confirm. Patterns, timelines, and silence. Lots of silence. Stay with me. The files include thousands of pages of court records, exhibits, emails, travel logs, depositions, and internal communications, many of which were known to exist, but not publicly readable until now. These documents do not function like a smoking gun. They function like a map, and the map shows something disturbing. Epstein did not operate in the shadows. He operated in daylight. Subscribe, because this matters more than names long before his first conviction. There were complaints, police reports, witness statements, settlements. This is not disputed. What is disputed is how little those warnings disrupted his access to power. The files show repeated references to meetings, introductions, flights, dinners, and financial arrangements that continued even after his status as a convicted sex offender was public. That is not an allegation of crime by everyone mentioned. That is a documented timeline, and timelines don't lie. They just wait. Here's where the discomfort deepens. Many people named in the files are not accused of crimes. Some are not accused of anything at all, but their names appear because they were present, connected, or benefited from proximity. And that raises a harder question than guilt. Why did association continue? Subscribe now, because this is where the system reveals itself. Power does not protect criminals by shouting. It protects them by normalizing them. Epstein's value was not secrecy. It was usefulness. He connected money to influence, introduced people who wanted favors to people who could grant them, provided access that felt exclusive and deniable. The files repeatedly show Epstein acting as a middleman, not always for illegal acts, but for opportunity. That's how protection forms. Not through threats, through mutual convenience. Stay with this. After Epstein's 2008 plea deal, widely criticized as unusually lenient, the documents show something remarkable. His world barely shrank. Travel continued. Social calendars resumed. Business discussions carried on. Publicly, he was radioactive. Privately, he was still welcome. That contradiction is the story. Subscribe, because this is what getting away with it actually looks like. The newly released files also expose how legal machinery slows truth. Redactions, sealed exhibits, procedural delays. Some of this is legitimate, protecting victims, ongoing cases, and privacy. But some of it functions as insulation. By the time documents become public, outrage has cooled, memories have faded, careers have moved on. The files show years of legal back and forth over what could be seen, when, and by whom. Transparency didn't arrive. It was negotiated. Here's another uncomfortable truth. Epstein's operation didn't rely on everyone being corrupt. It relied on enough people deciding it wasn't their problem. Pilots filed flight logs. Assistants scheduled meetings. Lawyers drafted agreements. Institutions processed paperwork, each step legal on its own. Together, catastrophic. Subscribe if you're still here, because this is the part that implicates systems, not villains. When Epstein was arrested again in 2019, the response was immediate and global. Not just shock panic. Lawyers moved fast. Statements were issued. Distancing began. The files show how quickly relationships were reframed once consequences became real. And then Epstein died in custody, officially ruled a suicide. What followed was not closure. It was fragmentation, investigations into jail failures, conflicting reports, unanswered questions, and most critically, the one-person position to testify about how the network functioned was gone. Stay till the end. This is the core. The Epstein files do not deliver justice. They document its absence. They show how accountability dissolves when it threatens powerful interests. No single document proves a grand conspiracy, but thousands of documents prove something else, that warnings were ignored, that access was preserved, that reputation mattered more than risk. Subscribe now, because this is why the story never feels finished. Even today, large portions of the files remain redacted. Again, some for valid reasons, others unexplained. Transparency arrives in controlled doses, never enough to collapse the structure, just enough to relieve pressure, and pressure is the only thing that ever forces change here, is the final truth. Most people don't want to face. Epstein wasn't an outlier. He was a stress test, a test of how much abuse, denial, and compromise a system could absorb before it broke. And the system didn't break, it adapted. So when people ask, where are the arrests? Where is the list? Why hasn't everyone been exposed? They're asking the wrong question. The real question is, why did it take decades, hundreds of victims, and a global scandal for this much information to become public at all? Subscribe, because this story doesn't end with a document dump. It ends when institutions stop protecting themselves more than the people they were supposed to protect. And that ending still hasn't happened.